Anti-Natalism, the argument to stop giving birth by aperture. I think I'm saying that right. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not. I might be butchering that. I'm not sure. But the video just dropped like a little bit earlier. And I decided I saw it on the feed. I was like, let's go, let's watch it, right? And there's not much else that I need to say, but this is, I saw this comment right here. It's the first comment I saw because it's recent, 31 seconds ago, by Carlo Gaitan. Carlo Gaitan. I don't fucking know, bruh. Because I've seen Gaitan and it's not spelled like that. Instead of a Y, it's an I. But this draws parallels to the giver and how Jonas is introduced to a life that is a normal one, full of great pleasures and suffering, as opposed to the one he is made to live in a society where no one suffers, but no one truly experiences great pleasures as a result. In the end, those given the sight of a normal and flavorful life choose it rather than a painless one. Which should give you a bit of an idea about what kind of stuff we're going to see in this video right here, 15 minutes long. Already a minute in. I don't need to make this any longer. You know, it's all about the audience's retention. But for you guys, I got to keep you guys in mind. Realize you guys got stuff to do. Guys got places to be, so let's go.
Suppose there is a couple, the Joneses, who just gave birth to a baby boy named Sammy.
No, the Joneses.
As they stand together in the hospital gazing down at their newborn, they share an awareness that the life ahead of Sammy will be filled with an indeterminable amount of both pleasure and suffering.
Sorry?
Life ahead of Sammy will be filled in the hospital gazing down at their newborn. They share an awareness that the life ahead of Sammy will be filled with an indeterminable amount of both pleasure
They're aware that he's going to live a life like them, which has a lot of entropy and randomness in it. Okay.
Suffering, happiness and heartbreak, miracle and tragedy.
But where are you guys in a socioeconomic standpoint, though? Because you guys could be doing a lot to limit a lot of the shit that people have to deal with. Like, sure, he's going to deal with a lot of bad shit, but the bad shit that he's going to have to deal with, instead of it being, like, really bad, like down here, maybe it's, like, this bad, which is still bad, because his normal state would probably be, like, right here. But instead of it being able to go all the way down here, maybe he's limited on only going down here, unless if he has, like, a freak, crazy accident, which is not really that common. It's very rare. Unless if he had, like, a freak accident or something, maybe he died. Not really likely, but especially depending on your neighborhood, you know, are you living in the hood? Are you in the projects? Are you from O Block? You know, like what the Joneses? I need to know more about them.
Then in an instant, the harsh reality of their baby's future hits them, and for a fleeting second, they look into each other's eyes and think, if we hadn't given birth to him in the first place, he wouldn't suffer anything.
Yes.
Right there, they both make the decision to give Sammy the best life they can.
But he also wouldn't experience any happiness, and he wouldn't experience at all.
As is humanly possible.
Like, before you can have suffering and happiness, you need experience in itself. And he wouldn't have that if he wasn't alive. You know, I just want to point that out.
The Joneses are great parents for thinking this. But in the words of David Benatar, it is curious that while good people go to great lengths to spare their children from suffering, few of them seem to notice that the one, and only guaranteed way to prevent all the suffering of their children is to not bring those children into existence in the first place. This is the philosophy of anti-natalism. It's the thought that human procreation is unethical. The belief that any action with suffering as its byproduct
Shut up.
should not be encouraged.
Shut up. It's not. Only people who believe this are nihilist-ass motherfuckers, bro. Nihilist-ass motherfuckers that hate their life. They see no point. They think it's meaningless because they don't believe in no religion. Okay, cool. Neither do I, but like, it's like, you know, they think it's meaningless because there's no objective meaning or purpose that is assigned to them. It's like, well, you motherfuckers are making the decision that the purpose of it is no purpose. You guys don't realize that. Like, you guys are in a paradox. Like, you're saying that the purpose is that it's purposeless, which is why the nihilist doesn't work. You know, you had, like, the existentialist is better in so many ways. You know, somebody like Nietzsche. You know, in terms of those motherfuckers, either the absurdist or Nietzsche is just way better than the nihilist, in my opinion. I'm not gonna hold you. From what it seems like, I've heard better arguments for both of those two. For nihilism, it's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
No matter how much pleasure will follow as well.
But experience.
Although the roots of anti-natalism can be traced all the way back to ancient Greece, the philosophy has experienced a particular spike in popularity over the last decade or so.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it.
This recent resurgence can be accredited, by and large, to the South African philosopher David Benatar, who authored what may be the most widely known literature on the subject. In his book Better Never to Have Been, Benatar argues that his anti-natalist views come from a place of compassion, stating that the only way to truly prevent the suffering that comes with existence is to not exist in the first place.
He
wants and he isn't the first person to have this thought.
He wants to believe he's coming from a place of passion, please. Let's not even have that, bro. It's experience. Experience is beautiful. To be able to consciously be self-aware, to have consciousness, to be able to be self-aware and see things and have a perspective, to be a conscious agent, to have the matter of the universe through processes become self-aware and conscious of itself, to be able to consciously navigate everything, all of it, the good and the bad, to be able to consciously navigate through all of it. It's so beautiful. It's so transcendingly awesome that I can't even explain it. Like, suffering, please. Please.
The Greek tragedian Sophocles once said, "Never to have been born is best." Heinrich Heine, the 19th century German poet, wrote, "Sleep is good, death is better." But of course, the best thing would have been to never have been born at all. And the preacher in Ecclesiastes said, "So I have praised the dead that are already dead more than the living that are yet alive. But better than both of them is he who has not yet been, who has not seen the evil work that is done under the sun." So as you can see, the school of thought that non-existence is inherently better than existence isn't...
But it's crazy that that's what happens when you're conscious, right? Like, think about how mad that is. It's the matter of the universe looking back at itself, coming into being, coming into existence through some weird process that we don't even understand yet. It's conscious, it's self-aware. The matter of the universe is consciously looking back at itself. We are its sensory organs, right? Like, we're aware. Awareness comes through. And when a conscious being, when a conscious agent is aware, it then goes on to say that the best thing would have been to not be aware at all. Like, at least some people make that claim. But to think that even some people, like, even though it may not be that many people, but to think that you can make such a claim, it like transcedes, like, realms. It's like, it's madness. It's so odd, but it's so cool and awesome at the same time. Like, think about that. You're conscious. But because you're conscious, you can then go on to, in a language that you're taught, write down or tell somebody somewhere, hey, my philosophy is, I think it would have been better to never have been born. Like, that's crazy. To never have the experience, to never be conscious. I mean, you got to think about the conditions that these people are living in. Like, they might be living under feudalism. They might be slaves. They might be, like, it just depends on who you are. It depends on how shit conditions were, you know? It seems like overall throughout the ages we've been getting better. It seems like that's the overall trend. Of course, it ain't perfect. Not everything's great. There's a lot of bad shit today, man. There's a lot of it. You can see it anywhere you look, especially because of how connected everything is now. But it seems like the overall trend has been that it's getting better. So that's why all these motherfuckers, but it's growing nowadays. Said that it got popular in the last decade.
A new one. In recent years, though,
it's all the teenagers.
These ideas have given rise to the anti-natalist belief that seeks to end human procreation. There are two different schools of thought under the anti-natalistic argument. The first is the one David Benatar makes when he says we should spare the unborn from suffering that is life. This argument centers around the harm in which existence poses on the baby being born. On the other hand of the spectrum are the misanthropic arguments for anti-natalism that center more around the harm that babies being born will go on to inflict upon one another, other animals, and the environment as a whole.
Pessimistic? Are you serious? That argument is already, I'm not even allowing that argument, bro. Come on, dog. Possible bad things? What about the possible good things? What if your son is a hero? What if your son goes on to create a scientific breakthrough that's gonna save everyone? Come on, dog.
To put it into context, consider this.
Oh, but they're not considering that option because to save everyone, my God, how horrible would that be? Wouldn't that be so bad? These are all some nihilist, suicidal types, I'm telling you.
The average carbon footprint for a single person in the United States has been estimated to be around 16 to 20 tons.
I don't want to be disrespectful either. Let's get that straight. I'm not trying to be like indifferent. I'm not trying to, disrespect anybody. But it's how it is. These motherfuckers are nihilistic. They seem pessimistic to me.
Per year. Meaning that just fulfilling daily necessities such as driving, showering, eating, and using electricity has unimaginably damaging consequences towards the environment we live in. So to anti-natalists, the most ethical way to solve this problem is to prevent it from happening in the first place. Both anti-natalist arguments, whether philanthropic or misanthropic, are centered around one core problem, suffering, and one proposed solution, to stop giving birth. And you might say, well, what about all the good things in life? Why would you not want a child to experience all of that? Well, anti-natalists believe that in human life, there is an inherent imbalance, or asymmetry, between pleasure and suffering. Let's take Sammy, for instance. Because Sammy has been born, he would experience pain, which is bad, and pleasure, which is good. However, if Sammy was never born, then he would never experience pain, which is good, and he also wouldn't experience pleasure, which is not bad. The argument therefore is that the presence of pain will always be objectively more harmful than the absence of pleasure, and so it makes sense to preserve the absence of pleasure rather than introduce the presence of pain. Everyone suffers from being human, but no one suffers from not existing in the first place.
But you don't get to experience the universe.
Bring forward.
Can't even get a picture. Look at the fucking shit we just sent out, bro. What's the new the James telescope new thing that we just sent out? I'm looking at myself when I look out there, bro. It's just through a bunch of different processes. Here I am, and I can consciously look at myself. Well, technically, like my ancestor. You know, it's weird. It's kind of weird. Experience though, what, good or bad? You're making a real value judgment there. Like, you're thinking that it's black and white. Like, you just think a bad pain, you're just saying pain associated with bad. It's pleasure, good, but there's not enough pleasure in the world, so therefore we believe better to not be alive at all. Like, what? Why are you associating those things with just bad? How is pain just bad? It's displeasurable. Nobody really likes it. It's not. It's the opposite of pleasure. Obviously, it hurts. It sucks. But who's to say that it's so bad? How is it bad? Haven't y'all ever heard of the obstacle is the way? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Pain can be used to make great things. Pain can be used as fuel. It can be used to really strengthen a person, make them stronger, give them more grit and determination. There's a lot of good stuff. It just depends on how you frame it all.
Is the hypothetical consent?
Of course, it still does suck, no matter how you frame it. If you feel like some real pain, it's gonna suck, you know, but that's not enough to say, let's just stop having kids, in my opinion. It's just not. Being alive is absolutely beautiful. 1 in 400 trillion chance of being consciously aware of myself, being consciously alive in the time that I'm alive, being born where I was born into who I was born into. It's not like everything's perfect, but I'm just so grateful to be alive. It's the way I see it. You know, obviously it's going to be my thing. It's going to be my bias, whatever.
An argument, which states that no one can consent to being born.
Oh, fuck
consent
off.
Is simply defined as the act of giving permission for something to happen.
Oh, please. You're not there. You're not there to give permission. You can't give permission. It's impossible. Get the fucking question out of the way. Get it out. Delete it. This
hypothetical consent argument, the unborn cannot give permission to being brought into the world, and so, as a result, the act of procreation should be seen as non-consensual and therefore unethical. If we're focusing solely on the information we have about pre-birth that is scientifically provable, then the hypothetical consent argument is pretty difficult to argue against. But of course, as we know, the full extent of our pre-birth experience isn't yet known by scientists, or even anyone for that matter.
I am a psychologist, and I know that there are depths of the mind that have remained untapped for most of us in our normal business of going about our affairs.
This uncertainty opens up the door for a wide array of pseudoscientists who seek to explore the nature of our pre-birth experience using methods which, although can't be definitely proven by science, still add some thought-provoking counterclaims that are worth considering. One of those pseudoscientists is Helen Wambach, who hypnotized 750 subjects in the 1970s and asked them the question, did you choose to be born? The responses she aggregated were quite staggering. 81% of Wambach's subjects reported that they did choose to be born, while 19% reported that they were either unaware of the choice or they got no clear answer.
What the fuck does hypnotizing have to do with anything? It just makes you more susceptible to suggestion. You're still conscious. It's an altered state of consciousness. But you're still conscious. It's not conscious. It's not something entirely different. It's just a little bit of a shift in consciousness. In a way. I'm not even fully 100% on that. But I do know that it's still a level of consciousness. That much I know. And I know that it just opens you up to suggestion. You're not gonna do anything that anybody tells you to do. It just makes you... It's almost like if you had like some... Think of you having like a happy pill. Like taking psychedelics or something. Like think of having like a happy pill. Where you're just so much open to suggestion. Anything anybody says, you're just so like, yeah, I'll do it. But you're not gonna jump off a bridge if somebody tells you to while you're hypnotized. Like, you're still yourself, you know?
Answer to that question. Of course, again, research and findings gathered from hypnosis can't be scientifically proven. But in the face of the seemingly unknowable, studies like this pose at least some perspective that should not be disregarded entirely. However, focusing back on the data that we do have definitive answers to, consider the story of Gold Mana, written by Sienna Schifrin, which is used by anti-natalists as an example for the hypothetical consent argument. Gold Mana is a wealthy man who lives on an island and decides one day, for reasons unknown, that he wants to donate some of his wealth to his neighbors on an adjacent island.
Good man.
These neighbors are comfortably off, but would still objectively benefit from his donation. Unfortunately though, due to historical tension between the governments of these neighboring islands, Gold Mana and his agents aren't able to physically go to the adjacent island, nor are they permitted by law to even communicate with the people living there. But still determined to donate, he handcrafts several heavy cubes of gold, each worth $5 million. Then he flies his plane over the neighboring island and drops the cubes down to the civilians underneath. He tries to avoid hitting people with the cubes, knowing that it could cause injury, but eventually after gifting several people with the wealth, he hits one person, who the story aptly names Unlucky. The impact of the cube breaks Unlucky's arm, yet at the same time grants them $5 million. Schifrin acknowledges that, on the one hand, with all the elements of the story considered, Unlucky was an overall beneficiary of Gold Mana's actions, as the $5 million that they received is enough to cover the cost of the broken arm and then some.
Yes, sir.
Yet on the other hand, Schifrin argues that an objective wrong was still committed by Gold Mana, since the harm he inflicted onto Unlucky wasn't consensual, despite how much the payout might have outweighed.
Go ask Unlucky if he's pissed off at this Mana guy. Go ask him. Go ask him if he wants to sue him for everything he has. Go ask him. Go ask him if he wishes it never happened. Go ask Unlucky. Why don't you go ask Unlucky, my guy? Who's saying that? Who's saying it was non-consensual? I don't give a fuck. Come non-consensually drop a golden brick on my fucking arm and break it. Please. Please, somebody. Come do it. Give me $5 million. I'll take non-consensually while I'm sleeping, dog. While I am unaware. Come do it.
The harm. Unlucky was living a decent life before Gold Mana came into the picture. His life wasn't pleasurable, but he didn't suffer any pain either. After the cube dropped on his arm, he experienced both pain and pleasure. In light of all this, we have to ask the question, which then is better? To have experienced pain and pleasure, or not any at all?
Fool, give me that money.
I think to answer that, we have to define what pain,
it's all subjective.
or in this case, suffering, is.
Life is suffering, Buddha.
For millennia,
Like
philosophers have traveled to great depths to dissect what this experience really means, and why it corresponds so closely with human life. One of those philosophers was Fyodor Dostoevsky, the infamous Russian novelist whose work contemplates the spiritual dimensions of human psychology in extraordinary depth, and who invented the genre of existentialist literature. Dostoevsky's final book, The Brothers Karamazov, tells the story of three brothers, Dmitri, Ivan, and Alyosha, whose opposing spiritual and world views are forced into question when they're tasked with solving their father's murder.
Damn.
The novel's most theatrical ideological clash occurs between Ivan, the middle son who is broken away from his religious family in pursuit of a more Western and rationalist education, and Alyosha, his spirited younger brother who has chosen to remain attached to his family's faith. Ivan claims that due to the existence of suffering, and more specifically the suffering of innocent children, to believe in the omniscience of God and the goodness of people is illogical, impossible, and impermissible. He laments, "Listen, if everyone must suffer in order to buy eternal harmony, pray tell me what children have got to do with it. It's quite incomprehensible why they should have to suffer." Through the character of Ivan, Dostoevsky paints a clear picture of a man whose compassionate intellectualism supersedes his faith in humanity so far to the point where he rejects the idea of human life altogether. Sound familiar? Several parallels can be drawn between Dostoevsky's Ivan and Benatar's Anti-Natalism, as both believe that if suffering is so synonymous with human life, then non-existence is the better alternative. This argument Ivan poses is more broadly referred to as the problem of evil, and it is one of the most ancient and compelling defenses against the belief of God that exists in philosophical literature to date.
But isn't the argument just against God, or like are you just making like an assumption there, or are you like reading? Are you like sort of just estimating? Like are you? This is your take on it. Like your take on what Ivan said is that it's better not to be born at all because there's evil, and it's like, why would you do it to the children? But I think isn't he mostly just saying like this proves that there's no like just God. This proves that these stories we tell kind of crumble in on itself. They don't really make sense. I mean, to believe that people are good, it's so beautiful. Like I wish, but it's not true. A lot of the stories that we've told each other, we've told each other throughout millennia. It's so beautiful. A lot of times it's a beautiful story, but it just fucking isn't true. It just isn't true.
The argument's possible origins have been traced back to Epicurus, an ancient Greek sage, who famously asked, "Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he isn't omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then from whence comes evil?" The last question, whence comes evil, or in other words,
whence comes evil?
Where does evil come from, is yet another heavily debated subject, which is, of course, ultimately unanswerable.
Evil? It depends. It's just a concept. It's just the way that we conceptualize things, the way that our brain makes sense of things. Evil? There's no objective evil. We have to be there subjectively to define it as evil, right? Because it's evil if it's not leading us in a certain direction, if it's not helping us to reproduce and grow society and make society better, right? It's all mostly just for society and for the sake of the cooperation of humans and all of that, right? This is evil. Right? What's evil? People robbing people. It wouldn't be a nice society if people just went around robbing people, killing people. Not a nice society. Can't really grow that shit if motherfuckers is just dying left and right. Not covering your mouth when you're sneezing. Not helping society. Owning slaves was totally permissible 250 years ago. You tell your neighbor that, they're gonna be like, okay, I have some too. What's the point of telling me that? Of course, all of us have some. It's not unethical behavior to them. It is now, but it wasn't to them. Why? Because the shit that we abide by isn't for ethics. It's not for good or evil. It's for the sake of society. And owning slaves was very useful. Because guess what? You get your nice plantation, have to pay nobody. It's basically like having robots nowadays. Imagine if you just had a full army of robots. That's it. You don't have to pay them wages. It's useful. It's automation. Delegation, whatever it is. It's useful. That's the harsh truth. And motherfuckers just went with that. It was the norm. Nobody would bat an eye. Nobody would raise an eyebrow if you said you owned slaves. It was just a common norm. Right? So evil, that's just a classification for certain things that we have of them. We put the label evil on them. Those things happening are what you say, but you're basically asking, why does anything happen? That's the real question.
However, Antinatalists would likely argue that whatever origin or meaning suffering may carry matters little, as it is irrelevant in the face of suffering's devastation. And in a sense, I completely agree, as searching for meaning to assign to suffering can so easily become a slippery slope which leads people to excuse, disregard, or gloss over the objective reality of both their own suffering and the suffering of others. Yet, at the same time, the practice of assigning meaning to suffering can also be a...
There's no glossing over, man. Like, it also, like, obviously I'm going to be biased. Like I said, look, I'm not going through immense suffering or not. Thank God. You know, God forbid. You know? But, like, I'm sure if I was right now sitting here going through immense suffering, maybe I'd have a different take. But I still wouldn't believe that I'd be better off not living at all. I'm not going to hold you. I am not going to hold you. I wouldn't say that. Even if something really horrible happened, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that I'm an anti-natalist. I just wouldn't.
Powerful coping mechanism, which can transform the internal world of a person who is tasked to live with its heavy burdens. The answer, like most things, possibly lies somewhere in the middle of these two extremes, and differs from person to person. In a way, both anti-natalist philosophies and the ideas of Dostoevsky's Ivan challenge us to come to terms with the reality of human suffering. Every day we're faced with things in our existence that are so factually unanswerable to the point that they can only be addressed through the lens of hypotheticals or faith. However, suffering, unlike these elusive, unanswerable existential questions, is very much real, tangible, devastating.
Is it not answerable or is it not askable? It's the real question, isn't it? Is it that you just can't ask because you're very limited by your function of reasoning, right? Reasoning has its limits, and people try to reason for things that they're not allowed to reason in. It's not built for it. Try to reason against the meaning of their life in comparison to the grandiosity of how large the universe is. It's like, look at how tiny and puny I am. I'm so insignificant. You label it insignificant. My life, I am labeling it insignificant. If I am a nihilist, I am labeling my life insignificant, unpurposeful, meaningless. You're labeling. At the end of the day, all you're doing is just labeling. You're using language. And you're also limited by the language itself. That is, and by your knowledge. What you believe, the way that you think of the world as an object or a subject acting upon an object, the way that you don't see yourself, the way you say, I'm coming into existence. Maybe you're coming out of existence. Maybe you're not a human being experiencing the universe. Maybe you're the universe experiencing a human being. It just depends on how you fucking frame it. It just depends on what you say. It depends on your language. It depends on how you, when you understand the limitations of all that you have. You do have limitations. You have a lot of limitations. That's so sad. Are you only focusing on the limitations of the reasoning? The reasoning is a very powerful tool. It helps for society. It helps for the shit. But remember, it's not built to question the universe. It's not built for that. Our language is not built to talk about hypothetical questions like this. It's not built for that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's unanswerable. Maybe we're just not capable of answering it. And if that's the case, that's fine. Let's do our best with these hypotheticals. Let's do our best with wonder, curiosity, science, whatever. Let's do our best. It's the best we can do. It's the best you can ask of us to do. Just stop with that bullshit. Stop with the jumping the gun and labeling yourself as meaningless and purposeless and useless and insignificant. Come on.
Overwhelming and ever present. You turn on the TV and hear one bad news story after the other. You go online and you're reading stories of corruption, human rights violations, and wars all around the globe.
Don't scroll that much.
With humanity suffering even more prominent now that we have access to world news at our fingertips.
Yeah, but you're not really experiencing it. World War II didn't happen. World War I didn't happen. The Civil War didn't happen. It didn't happen, guys. Because all you can do is read about it. You're not experiencing the real suffering. You're not experiencing the real tragedy. You're not actually experiencing the event. Therefore, it didn't happen. Nothing that you didn't experience happened. Stop with the news. You're desensitized as fuck. If that's all you see, that's all you'll believe. That's all you'll think about. You are what you think about. You are what you consume. You are what you attend to. You are what you think about. what you see, what you do on a daily basis. It all starts with thoughts. Think about it. And all you're doing, you wake up 4 a.m, first thing you see is massive school shooting. I did that one time. I woke up, checked my story, checked my brother's story. Open up Instagram, check my brother's story. Uvalde, shooter, 18. 18 kids shot. And it's not necessarily about just, because turning the cheek. It's not just about being ignorant. Of course, I want to know the news too. There's usefulness in that. There's usefulness in knowing what's going on. There's usefulness in wanting to stay updated and up to date and up with the info and knowing what's going on. Because not knowing is kind of stupid. You don't want to be that guy that doesn't know. But you don't need to know everything. And you don't need to have an opinion on everything. And you don't need to wake up and see at 4 a.m. and you're starting your day off with that. Of course, it's not that I'm weak. I dealt with that day fine. I was happy throughout the day. But it's just like, you're really not supposed to do that. Like, waking up at 4 a.m. to hear about... the first thing you do is see some horrible tragedy like that. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Like, think about what that might be doing to you psychologically. Think about what that's gonna do,
That arguments for anti-natalism are becoming more and more compelling and seeing a rise culturally.
That's why I don't watch news.
In the end, we're faced with one question.
Of course, I still do, but...
In the face of all that we know to be concretely true about the reality of suffering, should you choose to believe that human life isn't worth creating, or that it would have been better if you hadn't been born? Or do you choose to still have faith in that intangible sliver of hope that there is some larger reason for your coming to this earth in the first place, despite the suffering that
Why do you need reason?
entails?
Why do you need reason? Think about what Buddha says. If you're gonna go ahead and put the Buddha quote, you might as well put in what they say after that. What's the solving to that? What's the, okay, life is suffering, this is what we're gonna believe? How do we go about living now? What are we gonna now believe after that, after we've claimed that that's a fact? Okay, so what do you do about that? Right? You voluntarily accept it. That's what you do. You say that it's fine being purposeless. Purposefulness is only really that important to Western society. Eastern motherfuckers don't give a fuck if something's purposeful or not. They don't care. They see nature as purposeless. And they think that's absolutely beautiful. They think that's gorgeous for things to not have a purpose. They just are. They're just a river. They're just water. They just flow. They just are. That's beautiful. It's an experience. Why do you need such a reason? Of course it will get you through the tough times. That's why. Because you think... Because that's how humans work. If you're gonna go through all this pain, you're like, well, am I at least gonna get something from it? Am I at least... Is there at least a reason for it? It's like, I can't tell you to shut up. Because I get it. It makes sense. I understand. But I also just don't... It's like, I don't think it's good enough, I don't think you're supposed to be asking that question. I don't think your immediate response should be to try to find a reason for it all. I don't think so. There's more to it than that. There's more to it than reason or purpose. It's not about those things. Those things aren't important. They're just important in the way that you think of life. In the way that you've been brought up to think about it. I think when you were a kid, you were worried about purpose. Look at you when you were a kid. You were just playing. You were at play. You were a child. You were charming. You were at play when you didn't have a single worry. Only when you have a worry do you now worry about purpose. Only when you have, responsibilities and you're an adult and you have to, you're growing up and you have to really face the truth and the reality of things. As they say, you have to face the truth, whatever, and you're not as much of a child anymore at play. Think about why only adults question that. I don't see any kids questioning that. Unless if they have really shitty conditions. Like a child that was sexually molested, whatever. Like something horrible, right? What do you normally gravitate towards? As a child. Even though you still fall on your knees. You still get a boo-boo. You still do all this. You still have to go get your vaccine. That shit hurts. Like a motherfucker. Do you question the purpose of it all? Not really your first imperative, your first initiative is to question reason, to question purposeness, to question if it was even worth it. Why do you have to gravitate towards those three questions? Because it makes sense. There's a reason to. Of course. I'm not saying that you're being stupid or irrational necessarily. But is it necessary to gravitate towards those three questions? Is it necessary? That's my question. Do you always need to go there? Do you always need to ask for purpose, reason? Or is it worth it? Do you need to ask that question? Food for thought.
No matter which side of the fence you stand on, I think it's important to acknowledge questions of this nature, questions of faith. It's because our attitudes towards and surrounding all that is unanswerable about our existence ultimately forms the philosophical bedrock of how we view the world and how we'll go on to act in our lives. Although Alyosha, Ivan's faithful younger brother, doesn't pose a very compelling counterargument to Ivan's laments during their famous fight that I mentioned earlier, the subsequent actions he takes throughout the rest of the novel go on to demonstrate Dostoevsky's final illustration of how one should conduct themselves even in the face of suffering and in relation to the problem of evil. Alyosha's direction has him working on the ground, directly with the impoverished schoolchildren of his community, doing the tedious work of actually making their day-to-day lives more enjoyable and infusing their lives with a sense of meaning. Alyosha becomes an active participant, helping out in every instance of suffering he encounters. This is made particularly clear through his mentorship of a young impoverished boy, whose suicide Alyosha prevents with his compassion. Meanwhile, Ivan spends the second half of the story dissolving into a state of delirium after realizing that his intellectual arguments against human life led to the murder of his own father, as they gave another man the confidence to abandon his faith and carry out an act of evil in the world. Dostoevsky's final message was that ultimately, the actions we take in the face of suffering matter more than the intellectual beliefs we hold and preach to others about the nature of suffering. To me, whether or not one chooses to believe that human procreation is ethical matters less than the quality of the subsequent actions which that belief system guides them to take in the world. Like the Joneses, would you be aware of the harsh reality of human suffering and prepare yourself to do everything in your power to protect the ones you love from it? Or will you simply throw your hands in the air and say, I didn't choose to be here anyways, so I don't care what happens? In the end, one should only feel confident holding beliefs against procreation after they can assess whether or not these beliefs can serve them with an effective means of coping with, and helping others to cope with, the suffering directly within and around them. Because, again, whether we realize it or not, our beliefs about the nature of existence hold great power over who we are, and how we act in the world. As Dostoevsky's final novel boldly states, is the only meaningful resource we have to combat the reality of suffering that comes with our existence.
Tough. Aperture, boys. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys thought. Leave a comment down below if you made it all the way to the end of the video, because if you did, you're a fucking goat. I'll catch you in the next one, man. Let me know. What are your thoughts? Anti-natalism? Or say, fuck that. You say, I'm actually glad that I'm here. It's beautiful to experience. Let me know. We'll see you.